Hi everybody, welcome to Filmmaking with Marcus. If you have found this channel, I'm hoping maybe you're a filmmaker or you're interested in the world of filmmaking. One of the things that in the backstory to Marcus is that I started as a child first I started drawing and writing stories, and then around, I would say 8 or 9, I got a hold of my dad's Super 8 camera. And it was winter in Sweden, where I grew up, and we had some tarps over these furniture, and there was snow on it. Looked like a mountaintop to me. Me and my brother, we took little toy cars and toy figures. We pulled them over and we pushed them around over this mountain. We filmed it with the Super 8, and I didn't even know there was film in it. Because I was only 7 years old. We were playing. And then my dad, or 8 maybe, and then my dad developed the film, and one day we saw it on the screen. Because see, back in the days, the parents used to screen VH or Super 8 videos, or films. It's the original version of home video. It's the original version for younger generation viewers. Super 8 is film, right? So if you have film stock, well, I'm going to be quick. Film stock, we have 35, which is what many movies were filmed on before the digital era came in. And 35 millimeter is the size of the negative on a film. Then half of that is 16, or not necessarily half, but the next step down is called a 16 or Super 16. This is another film format that people used to make movies with. And then you had Super 8, which was the 8 millimeter size, was the size of the negative. Fairly small cameras, very compact and simplistic, but still they have a certain magic to them. And when you film with Super 8, the film stock, you used to also be able to edit on something called a moviola. Moviola is this tiny little thing where you have one reel on one side and another reel on the other side, and you roll it and then you make a cut. You have a little like a knife that comes down in the middle. You have a little screener right in front of you, and you can see the exact frame you're on to make your cut. Then you take whatever you want to cut out or in, cut that out, take it off, put it back together, and you splice it. You use a little piece of tape and you splice it together. This is the process this is the old school editing. This is how editing worked before the computers came in. And so originally I learned to do that on Super 8. In the first little film, when my dad showed that those toy cars jumping off the mountaintop, it was an amazing experience for me, and something made sense within me. And then I had this teacher in school who I wrote this story. I wrote a bunch of stories because I really liked reading books. So at 9 years old, I wrote this story, and this teacher looked at me. I might have been 8, I'm not sure. This teacher looked at me and he gazed at me. He's like, "Did you write this?" Because he didn't believe that I wrote it, and I did, right? And I was like, "Yeah," and he was very impressed. And it made me, the feeling inside was very profound. So, and I remember it today, right? It's been a long time, but I remember it. So that sort of set me up for this idea and this path of filmmaking, of telling stories. So I started writing stories early, and I started getting on my filmmaking journey in school. We had a film club, and that was a blessing, because at that point in my life I was 11, 12, and it was just beautiful to be allowed to play with Super 8. VHS had just come in, and my dad had an early VHS camera, old time VHS cameras. The camera was sizable, but it didn't, and then you had 2 cables. One ran to the tape deck and one ran to the battery deck. And these decks were pretty heavy and big. There was no way you could move your camera. You had to be stationary. So I ended up making, I think it was 3 or 4 movies that I sat. One was set in space, one was set in like some deep dungeon world and I made monsters out of Play-Doh, and I had little storylines going on. I was playing music on my mom and dad's vinyl record player, playing that while the monsters were moving through the screen. And then I put one movie underwater where I used a filter to put in front of the camera to make everything blue. And and I had sand on a whole table, and I built these out of foil, aluminum foil, different colored aluminum foil. I built algae, and I had a little castle underneath the ocean, and the whole story that happened with submarines and stuff. And then when I was 12, and you know, the Star Wars, the second movie had come out maybe a year or two earlier, and I wanted to make one other movie with my dad's VHS camera. I took a whole table, filled it with cotton, because it was going to look like snow, and I hung up white sheets around the table to make it look, you know, white, everything in the background, so we were on a snowy planet. And then I had this ship that was going to come in landing, and I had it hung in fishing line, hanging in, and it was supposed to be this ship that was like shut down, and it's made its way down to the surface of this planet, and it landed into the cotton, and I was going to set off a little firecracker to make it look like an explosion, because of course that's what Star Wars explosions looked like in my perception. So I I lit up this firecracker, not realizing how flammable cotton is, and the whole table caught on fire. It came really quick too, right? Like it's a surprise. I was 12 and I tried to light this. I don't even remember if the firecracker actually went off or not, but the cotton caught on fire, and suddenly I'm like, oh! And I remember seeing on the tape too how the fire just started spreading. And I ran out into the kitchen and grabbed the fire extinguisher. My mom and dad were like, what are you doing? And I ran back out, and I managed to extinguish the fire, so nothing bad happened. But that was the last time I was allowed to make movies at home. But by the age of 12, I had made like 4 or 5 movies, 3 Super 8 movies, and 3 or 4, so maybe a few more, 3 or 4 VHS movies. And it was super nice, right? For me, that was just the path I was on. And then school changed. Sweden at that time, the creative expression of filmmaking was not very encouraged. It wasn't very easy to find places to make movies. So it was a long journey of just kind of finding my way through the jungle of how do you get to express everything. And I was also pursuing acting. I was also a young actor at the time, so I was in a musical, and I did whatever stage stuff I could do, and then I ended up in this theater school. And but still, this is the 80s in Sweden. Filmmaking was not big on the map of education. Most of the counselors that I went to, the school counselors, were, when I said I want to make movies, I want to be a director, I want to be an actor, they said, do you know how difficult that is? You should get a real job. Go and get a regular job, a regular school, and then you can pursue your film and your directing and your acting on your spare time. And it was, of course, and you know, I did not really truly have the support of my family at the time, so it was a sort of having to go against a lot. Like I just follow my inner voice, what I felt was my calling. And over time, it led into, like, I wrote a theater play with a friend of mine when I was about 19, 20, and then I kept kind of working my way towards things. I became a journalist in order to learn how to write better, because I thought if I learn how to, you know, work with language more, I'll be a better writer. I also became a photographer because I thought if I can take better pictures, I'll be a better filmmaker. And over the years, I ended up, when I was in my mid-20s, I ended up going to Santa Monica College, and I took an AA degree in film studies, and I took acting classes, I took film history, I took film critical theory, I took script writing, and all these together, and then art history, which was actually, it's very underrated, I believe. Art history was a beautiful addition to learning how to compose a picture, and to create tension and contrast and conflict within a frame. And that can be very useful if you're a director, even as an actor or a writer. Learning how to find tension, conflict within a story, within each scene, within each character, is a beautiful way to create a propellant in the story. Sometimes if you ask yourself, why am I being sucked into, dragged into this story? Why is this more interesting than this other story? If you start to look at how the characters are portrayed, you start to look at how the scenes are built up, and you start to look at how the overall arc of the whole piece is, you realize that there's conflict that's driving the characters forward. And one of my absolute favorite of all time TV shows is Stranger Things. And if we break that down, I'm not going to break that down right now, but I'm just going to give an example. Look at how they portray Hopper, the cop, when we start. He stands in the shower and he smokes a cigarette and he takes some pills, and I think he might even be drinking whiskey in the shower. He is in huge conflict. And when we realize this is a cop, the conflict is right away, right there, from the get-go. That there's inner turbulence going on within this character that's supposed to uphold law and order, and he himself is in a lot of trouble within himself. Suddenly that's an interesting character. And that goes through both Stranger Things, but most good movies will have conflicted characters of different nature, right? You can look at Spider-Man. Look at the Spider-Man from the early 2000s, the conflict within Peter Parker, or any one of the major movies, you'll find conflict within the character that then spreads throughout the movie as well. And this is a beautiful, of course, it's not rocket science, it's not super tricky, but if you are a writer or a filmmaker, it could feel like rocket science. What drives a script? What drives a story? What drives a character? It's not always easy to figure it out. And the more you learn about these things, the easier it gets, right? So when I wrote my first script, when I was still in school at Santa Monica College, late 1990s, I became like, the first script wasn't bad, not at all. But it was tricky the characters were sort of flat. The dialogue could be flat. The second, and I wrote my first script thinking, my God, one feature film and I'll be off to the races. Because we heard about this man there's a movie called Galaxy Quest, which is a beautiful, fun sci-fi movie made in the late 90s. And it's just real funny. And if you watch Galaxy Quest, the funny thing about that is that a teacher at Santa Monica College wrote that script. And as far as what I've been told, now it could be wrong, right? Because it could be a myth as well. But what I've been told is that was his first script and he got picked up and he made it big. Now, that was the story we all went with. So we all thought, if you write one script, you'll be home free, right? Turns out it wasn't the whole complete truth, right? We got to write a lot more in order to get better at our craft. Because there are two things here, right? One is you have an inner calling to tell your stories. And you are most likely very talented. And even if you think you're not, you probably are. This inner calling is something that it's there for a reason. And if you learn how to listen to that, if you learn how to listen to the inner self, you will be sitting with learning how to tell your stories. But we also have to learn how to be open and humble about the learning process of, can I get better? Can I get better at creating these stories? Can I tell stronger characters? Can I create more vulnerable characters that have to overcome a bunch of problems? How do I do that? These are questions that when you put them in place in a script, they become much better. So my first script was sort of flat. Second script was better. But I was still like, probably need to do another one. And at that point, I wrote one script a year. And I wrote the third script, was a vampire story. And somehow, and I was in my mindset of like, I'm going to create a fantasy world. And it turned out to be a pretty strong script. It was a good backstory woven into our reality. And of course, over the years, there's been many other movies made in similar fashion. That movie was written, and it never got made. I mean, it's not too late ever, but it hasn't gotten made yet. But it did get some interest. It garnered a little bit of interest from different production companies from this site called Inktip that I put the script on. And they were looking and going through it, and then they found my script and started reaching out. So that was encouraging. I kept writing. I wrote like a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth. My 10th script And every script we write, I believe, every script I wrote, I believed in when I wrote it. And I got to the end and I still believed in it. But then a year later, a few months later, I had a new idea and I wrote something else. And about, I guess that's 12 years down the line, 11 years down the line, I wrote my 10th script. And the 10th script turned out to be a good one. That turned out to be what's called commercially viable. So the storyline of it is simple, it's pretty straightforward. It's about a hero, an anti-hero really, who is out of shape, ill, and has to overcome a lot of issues in order to get better. It's called At Night. We made a teaser for it. I will be linking to it underneath. Maybe I'll even screen a little bit of it right here. At Night it's a strong thriller, drama, action thriller that is really a nice story.
Tack så mycket. Fantastisk kväll här på Salon Easy. Tack. Vad fan? Hallå?
So then, and then I kept writing, new ideas popped up, kept writing, and I made a movie in 2013 called The Fourth Candle. We filmed it in 2013. 2012, I was a part of making another movie called LFO, which in Sweden we made it was very contained. It was a feature film. We made it in one house with very few actors. But the way the story was told, the storyline, how the writer Antonio Tublan with Ping Pong Films, how he wrote it was genius, and how he made it was genius. So it turned out to be a really good movie. For 10 days we shot this feature. He put it together, he edited it, and it got into the Fantastic Film Fest here in Austin. And he was picked up by Elijah Wood's production company, and they distributed the movie called LFO. You can find it online. So then we move on. I made my own feature film we filmed it in 2015. Started late 14, finished in 15, and then I edited and I didn't finish it until early 2017. But that's the case, right? When you make your own movie, I took my buddies in it, put my buddies into it, and that movie was called Unrighteous Men.
Alla som jag älskar, de tuktar och agar jag.
Du är ju helt otrolig. Nu får du lägga av med det här, Harald.
Om någon lyssnar till min röst och upplåter dörren, så ska jag gå in till honom.
Jag har fått prata med dig om Gud. Har du släppt in Jesus i ditt hjärta?
Du är för fan helt jävla stör. Spring inte här och knacka dörr.
välj din väg, Harald.
An Unrighteous Men is a feature film. It's about the conflict between an atheist and a Christian, and and a bunch of backstory to it. And it's a very dark, religious-themed action thriller. But it's contained. It's only, basically the location is one house, but we shot in two houses because we had the basement in one house and the upstairs in another house. And we had like 5 actors in the whole movie. And it was a very, and I filmed it, I wrote it, I directed it. I wrote it together with Maria Chiara Salvi, but it turned into a beautiful movie. So, a few years later, that movie got distribution. So it's also available to be watched on Tubi. And of course, that's a dream coming true. I made a super low budget movie that was picked up. And this is where it all kind of comes together, as in, keep going, keep working, learning your craft, keep getting a little better. And yes, we got to stay on track. And yes, we got to figure out how to network. And yes, we want to keep writing, which I keep writing, I kept writing. Got a script called The Winter right now, which is, we're developing it. We're in pre-development where we're looking for funding for it, and it's going really well. It's really exciting. It's a beautiful movie, and it's going to be a big deal once it comes out. So, but then we have, you know, along the line, I made Bite Me with Susan Dalian, which was a beautiful, funny, dark short film, dark comedy.
Hey kids, what you eating?
And it just, but it's a good story, so it still stands up. And I'll also link to that. It's on this page called Bite Me. You could watch it just for fun, 10 minutes. Then I made a darker piece in 2019. It's not a short film, 5.5, 6 minutes, called Ravage. And that is I filmed that one, and you know, me and Shauna Horns Pettigrew produced it, and I directed and wrote it and filmed it.
I have sinned.
No one is innocent. Tell me, my son, when was your last confession?
A long time.
What kept you?
Rage. And bars.
And then last year, we made a movie called Locked In, which we shot in 2 days. It's a short film, and but it's a horror short, and it's exciting. It's coming out into the film festival circuit this year, and at some point we'll be posting up on it, and it'll be having a premiere somewhere. It turned out to be, it's a beautiful looking piece. It's a really interesting, almost Hitchcockian how we filmed it, how we shot it. And so my encouragement, why I'm sitting here, is to encourage you to keep going on your filmmaking journey, to encourage you to not lose faith. I'm looking forward to the next video with you, and I'm going to be breaking down scripts. I'm going to be breaking down different films I've made and other films that are out there. I'm going to also be informing you or sharing with you the filmmaking journey of, like, how do we do this? We start with an idea, we write the outline, we write the script, we go from script to screen. How do we do that? Who do we talk to? How do you get your actors? How do you get your director of photography? How do you get all these people that you need in order to be a successful filmmaker? Alrighty, I hope you enjoyed the video. Click like and subscribe if you did, and feel free to come on board and join the channel, right? Press that alert button, notification button or bell. I'll be posting as often as I can, and more power to you. More power to you. Yes. Talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.